Welcome, folks. I'm Jabby Kuwait, joined by, I almost said a Char Kirk. No, STEPH SABRAW. We're joined by STEPH SABRAW, and we're looking at predictions about 2020 from 1994. This is from JJ's YouTube channel. I am a big fan of JJ. I've been binge watching his stuff for the better part of a few months now. He's a Canadian YouTuber, makes interesting random videos, like interesting facts kind of stuff.
Oh, cool.
He has a lot of like random knowledge, and he used to be like a political pundit on like Canada's version of CNN.
Oh, and just skirted off
and
into
to do YouTube land. Yeah, it's
hell
crazy.
Yeah.
So if you guys haven't already, hit the subscribe button, bell icon, all notifications, vote this up, and subscribe to JJ's channel as well. There's a link in the description below.
Hello, friends. My name is JJ. So, as Mark Twain once said, everybody loves hearing predictions, especially about the future. But everyone also knows that predicting the future is one of the oldest scams in existence. Though these days, it is less about phony palm readers at the county fair and more about fake gurus on the internet giving you bad investment advice. Now, truly worthless predictions about the future tend to be easily identifiable because they are so obviously ideologically motivated. Orthodox Marxists, for instance, have been claiming we're living in late-stage capitalism for over 100 years now because their whole worldview just takes it for granted that capitalism will inevitably collapse. Or how about the so-called gold bug set? Gold bugs are the people who constantly say we are on the brink of mass inflation and economic ruin because we don't have a monetary system based on gold anymore. But no one really takes them seriously because much like Marxists, their predictions are based on an ideological theory of inevitability, not impartial observation of the actual world around them. Which brings me to this book, The World in 2020 by the British journalist Hamish McRae. This is a book I had to read for college about a decade ago. It was written in 1994, and as the title suggests, it was supposed to provide a vision of what the world would be like in 2020. And I have to confess that when I found this book in my parents' house the other day, I was like, score, this will be some premium YouTube content. I bet that old teabag got everything wrong. But alas, he did not. And that is because Hamish McRae is a pretty moderate, non-ideological sort of guy. His method for predicting 2020 was to just look at the trends and events of the 1990s and make reasonable extrapolations of what was therefore likely to happen over the next 25 years. His conclusions don't add up to some sort of grand sweeping thesis destined to vindicate the theories of any particular political group, but are rather just a mixed bag of good and bad things happening in all sorts of different directions, because that, of course, is how life actually is. So let me take you through a few chapters of his book, and hopefully we can learn some lessons about making good predictions, especially about the future. So let's start with his predictions about the technology of 2020. McRae says that from his perspective in 1994, there's nothing going on to suggest that society is on the brink of making any big advancements in the field of electromechanical technology, which is the sort of tech that gives us things like cars, washing machines, or aircraft. There will be no completely new product like the car or aeroplane, which will go from prototype to mass market, which of course was true. Instead, he is bullish on the sort of technology that does seem to be on the upswing in the 1990s, which is personal computers and the internet.
Wow.
Circa 1994, the trend lines were clearly in the direction of personal computers getting faster and cheaper, and more people going online. So therefore, he reached the logical conclusion that by 2020, most middle-class people would be able to afford a powerful computer connected to the internet. McRae, in turn, predicts that the rise of the internet will mean working from home will become more usual, which is certainly broadly true. Though, when you read what he's written, I think it is pretty clear that he expected something more like the pandemic style of work, where everyone who can work from home does work from home, to become much more mainstream much earlier, which I think is actually a good example of how sometimes the future is kind of weirdly irrational in a way that is hard to predict. Like, why didn't more people work from home before the pandemic, even though we clearly had the technology to allow it?
It has something to do with supervision, I think, is the ability to supervise your employees. You know, if you work out at home, lifting weights and stuff like that, you have a different attitude than when you're at the gym, and there's this sort of urgency and pressure when other people want to use the equipment, when you're around other individuals who want to also get fit. There are some people who are quite successful working out at home, but there's a lot of people who thrive in the gym environment. And I think that working is kind of similar in some ways. You give people the freedom to do it in their own time. Some people are more efficient that way and are more likely to be productive, you know?
Yeah.
Just depends on the individual.
I also think that we weren't taught to have that sort of behavior. We're taught to perform when people are watching. We've been in school since we were 5 years old. We've always had a teacher. We've always had a grade system.
Well, I'm half Asian, so I was in school since I was 1.
I'm only a quarter, so I wasn't in school until I was 5. You're a little bit ahead of me.
Just joking.
Yeah. In the beginning of the pandemic, when we couldn't go anywhere and I was just working out alone, I was probably giving like 25%.
It's harder.
It's way harder.
The competitive,
Different.
yeah, the competitive energy is hard to invent when you're at home by yourself. But the prediction about computers was actually fascinating to me. In 1994, I don't think a lot of people thought eventually we'll just have that in our pocket.
Yeah.
You know?
That McRae doesn't really anticipate the way that computers and the internet will transform entertainment. In the 1990s, computers and TV were considered these two very distinct things.
Yeah.
So he assumed that as we became a more computer-centric society, TV would decline. There seems to be a practical limit to the amount of time people are able or prepared to spend in front of a screen.
That's true.
So that underestimated the possibility that computers themselves could become a source of TV-style entertainment through things like YouTube and Netflix. And I'd also say that we've definitely learned over the last 25 years that there does not, in fact, seem to be a limit to how much time people are prepared to spend.
Oh, I interpreted that a different way. I interpreted that as you sort of have to pick which screen you're going to be. I went stupid on that one. He's right. Okay.
With their screens, so long as those screens can do enough different stuff. All right, so how about natural resources? In the 1970s, a lot of experts warned that the world was running out of oil.
The oil and natural gas that we rely on for 75% of our energy are simply running out.
But by the 1980s and 90s, it had become clear that there was actually still plenty of large reserves around the world. So McRae concludes, the bulk of the world's energy will come from fossil fuels for another 25 years at least, maybe for 100. He is accordingly skeptical that alternative forms of fuel, like nuclear and solar, will catch on anytime soon, given they're so bound up in problems of safety and practicality that show no signs of being resolved, which indeed they have not. But he says this from a place of moral ambiguity. He says the continued use of fossil fuels will make concerns over conducting a giant experiment with the Earth's weather, when we know so little about the long-term consequences of what we are doing, a growing issue of social concern over the next 25 years. Hello, climate change.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, he looks at the science and concludes that since the effects of global warming will be quite limited for a generation at least, it will also be an easy problem to ignore. A considerably wronger resource-based prediction he makes, however, is when he says, a shortage of fresh water is probably going to be the most serious resource problem the world will face in 2020.
That's an interesting one, because my understanding is that there's a water shortage between here and Utah, like that whole area. Every time they say, oh, there's a water shortage, I'm like, well, last time y'all said there's a water shortage and everything worked out just fine. So I don't understand what's going on. Is this one of those things where we're just getting panicky for no good reason? Or is there like genuinely, legitimately a water shortage? It's not even us. It's not even us. It's agriculture.
Yeah. I'm like, should we? I'm like, no, but we've all been told to turn off the water when we're brushing our teeth, like in the middle. You know, I mean, there's little things we do with water.
I do not advocate leaving your pee in the toilet. You know, that's not saving that much water.
Yeah, you're letting it just sit and stain your
I hate
toilet.
that.
I would rather you pee in the shower as the water's running down.
I like that. I like that.
When I was young, there used to be a popular theory that as the world's population continued to rise, more and more fresh water would be needed to grow food, and this might even lead to wars over water. In 2004, the CBC even made a TV movie about the grim future in which America invades Canada in order to get our precious water. But the problem with looming scarcity predictions is that they tend to underestimate the degree technological innovation, in this case, new technologies in irrigation and plumbing and even genetic engineering, can help dramatically improve the efficient use of a scarce resource. I mean, it's not hard to find people these days who are still willing to warn you about the looming water crisis, but I would hardly say it is one of our most front of mind issues right now. But speaking of geopolitical crises, the last chunk of the book is a run through of all of the major nations of the world, with predictions of what McRae thinks we're likely to go through by 2020, based on the trends of the 1990s. In Europe, he is generally pretty skeptical of the EU, which in the 1990s was still in a relatively early phase. He expected it would get a lot bigger, but not necessarily more powerful or more like a single country, which is what some were predicting at the time. He has a good line where he says, there will be no final form. The most important difference between the Europe of the 1990s and that of 2020 is that people will have realized that Europe is not progressing towards some goal of greater unity, and that the closeness of the association of European states ebbs and flows over the centuries. He concludes this because he saw Europe of the 1990s as a continent where all of the various countries countries clearly still had a lot of domestic issues to sort out, so it was hardly obvious that they were ready to merge into some big idealistic transnational thing. That said, he was also probably a bit too skeptical. He thinks this idea of making a single currency for all of Europe is quite unrealistic, for instance. He doubts the countries will be able to pull it off, which of course they did, and long before 2020. In case you were wondering, he does more or less predict Brexit, saying Britain might look at a dysfunctional EU and conclude it's better off alone, but also cautions negotiating such an arrangement might, however, prove very difficult. Yeah. He accurately predicted German economic growth would continue to remain low after the merger of East and West, but inaccurately predicted this would make the country less powerful in Europe overall, which really hasn't been the case. He thought that French politics would be defined by persistently high unemployment rates and growing anti-immigrant sentiment, which would breed a lot of populism, which is true. But he also thought that this meant it seems highly likely that at some time in the early years of the next century, there will be another political shock, which will result in a sixth republic being formed, which is to say a brand new French constitution. This hasn't happened, but you could say that the election of President Macron, a complete third-party political outsider, is the next closest thing. Italy, similarly, has not split into two countries, which McRae thought was likely, given the 1990s had seen Italy's north and south continue to develop independently and often resentfully of each other. But Italy did adopt a new party system based mostly around north-south social economic differences. So again, that might be the next closest thing. Russia, overall, he was quite wrong about. In the 1990s, Russia under President Yeltsin seemed to be edging in the direction of becoming a relatively open and democratic country. And so McRae said it was a sensible guess that they might become an economic giant by 2020. Maybe even on the brink of joining the EU. Instead, we got the pariah dictatorship of Vladimir Putin, a politician who, in retrospect, was already beginning to consolidate power in the mid-90s, but outsiders didn't really notice. McRae was similarly fairly off about China. Its economy was growing fast in the 1990s, so he predicted it would be on the brink of becoming the world's largest economy by 2020, which is true. But then he adds, what is now the People's Republic will in all probability turn into a loose federation. This will, of course, include Hong Kong, but may very well also include Taiwan.
And those are goals.
When in reality, China has actually become a more centralized dictatorship under President Xi, in which Hong Kong's autonomy is suppressed and Taiwan is more...
He was saying he would include Hong Kong and Taiwan, right? I mean, obviously a loose federation is inaccurate because it's very, like what he just said. Winnie the Pooh is trying to like really tightly keep everything.
Yeah. He's
but
old school.
Yeah, exactly. And so the notion of Hong Kong and Taiwan being integrated is a fight that China's definitely fighting. So they're trying to suppress Hong Kong and Taiwan. And like, it's interesting because the people of Taiwan don't want anything to do with China, like at all. Like, we're our own people.
Yeah, they're like,
don't call us Chinese.
Please, please.
More alienated than ever. McRae's logic was that China was too big and contained too much diversity to continue to be governed as a centrally managed entity, which I guess is wrong on some level, although there certainly are lots of people who are willing to say that President Xi's desire to double down on centralized control into the 2020s is a high-risk gamble, threatening both China's long-term economic prosperity and internal peace. And lastly, McRae's main prediction for America was not that it would necessarily rise or fall per se, but more that it would just become increasingly consumed by its own internal problems and neuroses.
That's accurate.
That's facts.
We're so concerned with just like squabbling with each other, and it's almost like Game of Thrones. The White Walkers are coming, man, and we're just like dealing with each other and like these minuscule, insignificant arguments, or at least to me, they're kind of insignificant in the grand scheme of things. And we got much bigger problems to be worried about. Why are we fighting about these things over here? How are we arguing about women's rights? I don't get this. Like, why isn't that just a standard where women have the rights that they need? Stop talking about that.
So like, that we can evolve and grow and be awesome.
Yeah, no, like that's. I thought Roe versus Wade was like, let's move on and fight other fights. Like, why are we going back to the... I feel like these are all red herrings. This is the conspiracy theory part of me. I feel like these are all red herrings that are coming up, so we're not looking at something else.
Yeah.
You gotta follow the money.
It's a distraction for sure. And that's the saddest part, is that it's going to affect people.
Yeah.
And to some people, it's nothing, right? Because it won't affect them. But it is a distraction because now we're so focused on just getting basic rights that we're not even seeing what could be coming next, because we're like, well, how can we be fighting for this if we don't have basic rights? And
exactly.
it's just so backwards.
Yeah.
It would remain the world's most powerful superpower, but by 2020, domestic support for its international leadership and all that entails will be wearing thin. In the 1990s, it was pretty clear that although some parts of the US were thriving as the national economy became less industrial and more based around the service and information sectors, there was no real plan to deal with the regions and people being left behind. As a result, McRae figured America was a country on track to develop worsening inequalities of wealth and living standards, defined largely by geography. He similarly sees America's high rate of immigration, which had been climbing steadily over the 70s and 80s, as an ever-growing source of tension, which is certainly true, but what he gets wrong is when he says that America will be the only developed country where this will be so. Like many people of his time, McRae seems to assume that the European countries will never embrace high American-style levels of immigration. But this was kind of a big oversight on his part, since even by the early 1990s, immigration in Europe was already their largest source of population growth.
I thought England took umbrage with immigrants. I thought that was a large part of Brexit. I mean, y'all who understand this stuff better than I do, please feel free to correct me in the comments, but I thought that was a big part of the argument. It was sort of a MAGA-like mentality that informed the desire for Brexit.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with Brexit, but I definitely know, at least when he brought up France, I know that specifically is a country that's constantly in tensions with immigration rights and rules and legislation. So I would expect that the entire EU would have similar because they're so centralized.
I've never been to France, so I can't speak on any personal experience, but I have spoken to people who have lived in France, who have visited France. The attitude towards non-white people isn't the best.
No, I've been there.
Oh, yeah?
It's not great.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's really insightful, however, is this prediction of how he figured American political culture would evolve. For perhaps 15 or 20 years, there will be a great tug of war between two established US traditions: the robust individual self-reliance that created US capitalism and helped make it the richest country in the world, and the much newer tendency for people to refuse to take responsibility for the consequences of their own actions and instead blame the state, big business, insurance companies, anyone who can be sued, or simply the fact that they are in some way disadvantaged.
Wow.
Regardless if you are on the right or the left, I think that everyone can agree that a tug of war between the productive and whiny elements of American society is absolutely one of the dominant themes of this age. McRae thinks the 2020s will eventually see a great radical shift in American politics, in which aggressive common sense triumphs, but he cautions the change in values will start at the bottom and move up. It will not be imposed from the top down. I will leave it to you to decide if there is any sign that that is happening or not. So this is just a quick overview of a few predictions from what is really a quite thorough and detailed book. It's also kind of a boring book, but in a good way, since so much of what he predicts is just right. Hamish McRae is clearly a very smart guy worth listening to, and he's still alive and writing to this day, so be sure to check out his recent work. But I made this video because I also think he's just a good role model, in the sense that he seems like a genuinely dispassionate analyst of the present and future. The reason why he was able to write a book as accurate as this is because he clearly didn't allow his political biases or philosophical beliefs, whatever those are, to color his predictions. He looked at trends and evidence and tried to make rational projections for where it would all lead, for good or bad, rather than just tell people what they wanted to hear or get attention with some crazy sensationalistic prediction, which is a moderate approach sadly not all futurists take. So in the comments below, let's hear some of your calm, moderate predictions for the next 25 years based on the trends of today.
Right.
And 25 years from now, in January of 2046, I promise I will come back and review them, even if I am President of Canada. In fact, especially if I'm President of Canada. See you all next week.
That was cool.
Yeah.
I thought that was a nice video. It was a little bit mind-blowing. The whole thing about productivity versus whining, it's like that's a very, very surprisingly touchy conversation, because like when you start to break down the nuances of that, you risk offending people really fast, and it could trigger people in a bad way. I'll mention a conversation that I had with my friend the other day. I said some word, and she's like, yo, you gotta be careful with that word. She was trying to warn me because like all these words are becoming words that are not okay to say. And she said that even the word stupid is starting to become a word that you can't say. I'm like, stupid? Really? That word? And I told her something that had been brewing in my mind for a while. Even before Black Lives Matter, before a lot of these current movements, I started to see this trend, and I'm like, I feel like a lot of people are just trying to have their own N-word that you're not allowed to say. She's like, I never thought of it like that. That never occurred to me. Everyone's trying to have this thing where like, I'm being oppressed. And I'm like, I don't think so. And we know what oppression looks like.
This was, a big thing with Dave Chappelle's last 2 stand-ups. I think he's going after that same issue that you just said. It's like there's groups of people that are really passionate and like have these issues and they might be facing some sort of oppression. It's interesting because I've changed my views on this a lot in the past few years. After the 2016 election, I was like very aggressive and angry, and I wanted to protect people that I felt were disadvantaged and disregarded. And I was like kind of moving towards that policing of language. And then in the past year or so, I've completely changed into, I still want to fight for the people that are disadvantaged and disregarded, but I have to focus on the issues that would make change. Words, though they matter, we have to be careful about what fights we're picking because like we said, like now we have to fight for Roe v. Wade, and it's like that's a waste of time when we should be feeding people who are starving, kids who are starving on the streets. And it's like with words, sometimes you cross a line. Most of the time it's free speech, and if you're gonna protect free speech, you have to protect free speech. So like, we cannot be hypocrites about it.
But we're caught up in the minutia of this nonsense, and I'm like, who is starting this fight? That's what I wonder. Is it really coming from the source that we think it is? Because like, and now I'm starting to walk back on the thought I expressed a moment ago, and I'm wondering if it's really coming from that group that is supposedly oppressed. I'm like, what the fuck is happening in the world? I feel like this is a big distraction while other things are going on. I don't know what that is. That's what's freaking me out. You know what I mean?
I know. And then when Clarence Thomas was like talking about looking at some of the other precedents that Roe v. Wade was under, which included things like gay marriage, it's like, bro, aren't we if people want to get married and they're not harming anyone, can we focus on what's harming people? Can we move on, you guys? Like, why are we taking it back?
Maybe the conspiracy theory is just like my mind trying to make sense of things, because there's a large part of the country that maybe doesn't agree with these forward movements, and so that's why we're still having this fight.
But if you look at the statistics of people who are in favor of choice, it's 71% right now. That's the population. Wow. Yeah. So that's like an intense advantage in the population. So I don't think it's necessarily that the population, I think with some things, it takes time to understand where social changes are changing and like how we change, how we act to people and how we treat them or whatever it may be. But I do think that there is a big, in America, the way America was made in a lot of powerful governments is about control, right? So like they're aiming at things that would control a lot of people in a small amount of time.
It feels like you keep people occupied, they're not going to be able to solve any problems.
We're just screaming into space.
I mean, you think about your average person, and they're constantly inundated with bills and just like daily issues. They got like the tax, for instance. Every year taxes come up, and it's so stressful to deal with. And it's like once you think you've got a moment to relax and just sit and ponder, like something else comes your way that you then have a responsibility you got to deal with. Being a grown-up is so complicated, and like nothing can really prepare you for that. No matter what your parents tell you, when you reach adulthood, it's like you're constantly inundated with new things that you have to deal with, and it's like you never have a chance to maybe solve a problem. And so I look at some of the fights. We watched another video. I forgot what it was. But we watched a video about like how these countries are constantly developing their arms to deal with each other. I think it was India and China.
The pearl necklace.
Exactly. And it's like, God, if only we found a way to stop that, to focus on the development of like a betterment for everybody. You put those same resources towards that, it's like we would solve a lot of problems. But we're preoccupied with these responsibilities and this fight. And like it happens on every single level. Someone's benefiting from this financially somehow. I just don't.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. It's crazy when you look too into it. There's so many things. I'm like, what do I focus on?
Exactly.
And then, taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
Yeah. You guys, thanks so much for hanging out. Hopefully you enjoyed some of this dialogue and the reaction. I'm Jabby Coy. This is
STEPH SABRAW.
Peace out.